Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video, we're going to be comparing a Toyota Tacoma TRD Pro to the all-new Nissan Frontier PRO-4X. Before we get into this video though, a huge shout out and thank you to the Brent Brown Toyota here in Orem, Utah for giving me some time with this Tacoma TRD Pro. I'm going to include a link to their inventory in the description down below so you can check out what they have currently. If you have any questions or need any help, just ask for Easton. And then on a side note, if you want to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. Let's get into it. So starting with the Frontier, we have a naturally aspirated 3.8 liter V6 that goes through a 9-speed automatic transmission. Fuel economy is 17 around town and then 22 on the highway, with power outputs being 310 horsepower and then 281 pound-feet of torque. And then under the hood of the Tacoma, we have a naturally aspirated 3.5 liter V6 that goes through a 6-speed automatic transmission. Fuel economy is 18 around town and then 22 on the highway, with power outputs being 278 horsepower and then 265 pound-feet of torque. So if you take those specs and throw them out in the real world, what it actually does with these trucks is it leads to them getting about the same fuel economy, and acceleration is actually pretty close. Now the Frontier is slightly quicker, but it doesn't really feel that much quicker compared to the Tacoma. Now when it comes to transmission response, this is where there's a huge difference. The 9-speed in the Frontier definitely feels a lot better than the 6-speed in the Tacoma, especially on the highway, because the Frontier doesn't do the gear hunting that the Tacoma does. Now when it comes to off-roading, if you're doing high-speed off-roading, again, the Frontier does edge out a little bit, but low-speed crawling and everything, both transmissions are honestly fine, and so you're not going to have any complaints either way. And the big thing with both of these engines is they're both super reliable. Now before we go over the front ends, I do want to mention, if you want to see more videos just like this, then I recommend you subscribe because I post content every single day. So starting with the Frontier here, first off, I love this like sand paint color. It looks really cool. But anyways, you guys can see Frontier logo there on the grille with the Nissan logo down below, finished in orange because this is a PRO-4X. There's a camera there in the center of the logo. And then you have these cool LED lights. Those are the daytime running lights on the top and the bottom. We got the fog lights down below. And then we've got this bash plate and this skid plate protection underneath with the tow hooks. Now when it comes to ground clearance with the PRO-4X, it's about 9.5 inches of ground clearance. And so, yeah, pretty solid specs. Now contrasting that with the Tacoma, you can see this one's finished in solar octane, which is such a cool looking color. You've got the TRD Pro decal there with the venting on the hood, and then we have the Tacoma's cool LED lights. I will say these lights are a little bit cooler than the Frontiers with their whole animation and everything. And then notice we've got the Toyota logo in the center of the grille. It's the Heritage logo. Again, you've got a camera there in the center, and then we got the rigid fog lights. And if you guys are wondering on those headlights, look at that. It's a cool little animation there. Skid plate protection underneath, just like the Frontier. We also have tow hooks as well, and we've got about 9.5 inches of ground clearance, so they're pretty much equal. Now I want you guys to let me know which one you like the looks of better. It's definitely a difficult decision because they both look so cool in their own right. Now the tire and wheel setup on the Frontier is 265/70/17 in the front and in the rear, whereas in the Tacoma it's 265/70/16 in the front and in the rear. So what that means is the Tacoma has slightly smaller wheels with more sidewall on the tires. And speaking of wheels, let's compare wheel design. So here's the wheel on the PRO-4X. Definitely a cool look. These are called beadlock style wheels because they're not actual beadlocks, they just look that way. And then we've got the TRD Pro specific wheels here on the Tacoma with the red accenting. Again, it's so hard to choose between these trucks. Now the next thing is going to be the suspension. So with the PRO-4X, and I'll show you guys the shocks in the back so you can see them a little bit better, you do have Bilstein shocks with this package. Now with the Tacoma, we've got TRD tuned suspension and shocks. You have Fox shocks with the Tacoma, and I will say these Fox shocks are definitely more advanced than the Bilsteins that are on the Frontier. Now, although these have about the same amount of ground clearance, something to note is the gap between the tire and the fender in the Tacoma is larger than the Frontier, so the Tacoma looks kind of like more lifted, if that makes sense. So we got our blacked out Tacoma badge here, and then you guys can see TRD Pro there on the back, and then we've got PRO-4X here with the PRO-4X. Now here's a look at the rear Fox shocks with the Tacoma, and then you guys can see leaf springs here in the back. And then if we pop over to the Frontier, you guys can see the leaf springs, but it's still hard to see those Bilsteins. Literally have to like crawl up underneath the truck, and then you can kind of barely see the shock. Now comparing the key fobs, you guys can see the difference in style with them, and functionality though is pretty much the same, but notice that the remote start function on the Nissan's a little bit more intuitive because it's a button you hold, whereas on this Toyota, you basically have to press the lock function several times and then hold it down, and then that's what remote starts it. Now popping into the bed of the Tacoma, notice the tailgate is dampened and it's going down very slow, but we've got a composite bed here in the TRD Pro. Look at the LED lights, 990 pounds of payload capacity, and then we have a full outlet as well. And the last thing to note is lifting up the tailgate, it does have a bit of heft to it. Now comparing that with the Frontier, also dampened, but I guess that one's even slower. 1,070 pounds of payload capacity, and then you guys can see here with the bed in the Frontier, and then look at like the LED lights, and then we've got an outlet. It's almost like Nissan's like trying to make sure they're comparing to Toyota. It's funny. Anyways, lifting up the tailgate, definitely lighter. And then when it comes to rear styling, this is where I do feel like the Frontier slightly pulls in front of the Tacoma. Now, first off, it kind of comes down to like the taillights. The Tacoma taillights definitely date the truck. The headlights look very modern, but the taillights not as much. But when you look at like the TRD Pro badges and how Tacoma stamped on the bed, that stuff looks really cool. And then of course, we got the TRD Pro exhaust, which sounds amazing and also looks really cool here on the rear end. But comparing it to the Frontier, again, these taillights, they just look a whole lot more modern, so it just makes the truck look more modern from a rear perspective. And yeah, that's not nearly as cool looking. There's no hiding that. And then popping inside of the Tacoma. Now this one just got dropped off from the factory, and so it's got everything inside of here, but you guys can at least see here with the padding on the door panel. And then I know the seats are all wrapped up, but basically what you have on the seats, and I'll be able to show you a little bit better with the front seats, is a lot of like black padding with some red. You can kind of see on the camera, some red stitching and everything. And I've sat in the back of the Tacoma a lot in the past, and so what I can tell you is in terms of space back there, you can fit adults back there comfortably with this larger cab you can get in the Tacoma, but it's nowhere near like as spacious as like a full-size truck like the Tundra, for example. Now comparing that with the Frontier, orange is the color for the Frontier. So red for the Tacoma, orange for the Frontier. But you got padding on the door panel, and then you guys can see here with these seats. Now I do think that these seats look pretty fancy with the Frontier, as you can see again with the orange stitching, and look at like the charging ports. And then in terms of space here in the back, it's about the same as the Tacoma. And then taking a look at the front of the Tacoma, you guys can see again with all of that padding, and then here's a better look at like the design on the seats. This is supposed to make it so the seats are easier to clean. And then again with that red stitching, notice the seat is power adjustable. And then you do have like TRD Pro there in the headrest, which is really cool. And then notice we got this for like your camera view function. That's for your stability control, and then for the outlets. And then let's actually quickly pop in. Gotta like squish myself in here, it's pretty tight. Ah, gotta love that V6. But look at the steering wheel, how it's like perforated here on these sides and get a slightly better grip, and then you get like the nice leather trim at the top. Now this does come with some nice stuff like adaptive cruise control, lane keep assist, all of that. And then you can see here with the center gauge cluster, mostly analog with the gauge cluster. And it basically has different screens where you can scroll through to see different bits of info on the truck. Pretty standard stuff. Most modern trucks have something like that. And let's see how the door sounds. Pretty solid sounding, actually. And then with the backup camera, you can see trajectory lines turn with the steering wheel. Got that bird's eye view as well. And then again, if I press that camera button, notice we got that cool 360 camera look. And then we do have heated seats here in the Tacoma. Got a dual zone climate system. And then look at the driveline select. So you have 2-wheel high, you've got 4-wheel high, and then 4-wheel low. And then down below we have our ECT power. You've got the controls for like the blind spot. This does have a power sliding rear window, by the way, which is a nice feature. And then you got like the charging ports. You can see you also have a wireless phone charging pad, some cup holders here, and then look at the TRD Pro shifter there. It does have the manual shift function as well. Again, if you want to shift that 6-speed automatic yourself. And then we do have a sunroof here in the TRD Pro as well, which is really nice. And then we got a bunch of fun controls here at the top. So you guys can see, first off, we have a locker for the rear differential here in the TRD Pro. And then we have our multi-terrain select and our crawl control. What this is basically the crawl control is kind of like an off-road cruise control, and you can use this to set the speeds. Multi-terrain select is a bunch of different off-road drive modes. So depending on if you like rock crawling, all that kind of stuff, like just depending on the off-road conditions, you can kind of change it, which is really cool. And so it's really customizable, and it's got a lot of fancy off-road tech. Now comparing that with the Frontier, again, you guys can see we've got all of the orange here with the Frontier. You're going to see that accenting all throughout the interior. And then look at the seats. Again, PRO-4X on the seats, power adjustable. And then we got a bunch of controls here. Like we got like our tow haul mode control, and you can see like for the outlets, some of the safety tech. You do have hill descent control, and then notice this does come with stability control and then a rear locker just like the Tacoma. And then if we pop in, let's hear how this door sounds. Yeah, solid, just like the Tacoma actually. Ooh. So with the steering wheel, it's pretty much just all the same material. So like the material you see at the top of the Tacoma steering wheel, this is what the steering wheel has all around basically. Still has adaptive cruise control just like the Tacoma. And then you guys can see the gauge cluster. It looks a little bit more modern, but still has kind of like the same feel, if that makes sense. And then you can see a bunch of different information on the truck, just like the Tacoma. And then popping over to the infotainment system, not sure why it's so dark. But you guys can see you've got a backup camera with trajectory lines that turn with the steering wheel. And then you also have that bird's eye view as well, because this also has a 360 camera system, just like the Tacoma. And if I press this camera button at the bottom of the screen, if it works, there we go, that'll actually pop on the other camera views. For some reason, the camera doesn't want to focus on the screen. But you guys get the point. And then moving on from that, dual zone climate controls, heated seats, heated steering wheel in this, and you guys can see those there at the bottom. And so we got some USB ports, and then you can see here with a little bit of storage space. Shifter for that 9-speed automatic transmission. It does also have a manual shift function. Wireless phone charging pad, just like the Tacoma, and then look at like the nice padding on the center console. And then we do have a sunroof in this truck as well, but notice there's no like fancy off-road drive modes here at the top or anywhere else in the interior because, well, it's a Pro-4X. It's always in off-road mode, people. I almost forgot to mention 2-wheel high, 4-wheel high, and then 4-wheel low, just like the Tacoma TRD Pro. And now when it comes to pricing, the Frontier stickers for about $46,000 and then the Tacoma TRD Pro stickers for about $52,000. And now that means we have to pick a winner for today's video. Now this is not a true apples to apples comparison because the Frontier Pro-4X is supposed to compete against a Tacoma TRD off-road premium. I mean, if you look at like the specs, the shocks that it has, the ground clearance, everything, I mean, it makes perfect sense that it competes against that and not a TRD Pro. And also like the price as well, $6,000 less than a TRD Pro. But if you look at a Tacoma TRD off-road premium, it's about the same price as this new Frontier. With that being said, here's how I kind of see it. I do prefer the powertrain in the Frontier. The transmission and the engine, definitely a better combination than what you have in the Tacoma from a power perspective and a drivability perspective. However, I prefer the tire and wheel setup on the Tacoma, and then I definitely prefer the shock setup on the Tacoma. Fox is just always better when it comes to off-road shocks with stock vehicles. At least some aftermarket stuff, it can be pretty good, but you know, when it comes to stock vehicles, Fox always seems to just be the best. And then when it comes to looks, I mean, both of them look really good, so it's honestly really hard to choose. And so like, yeah, it'd be a struggle. Here's, I guess this will probably answer this for you guys. So if I were to buy a Tacoma TRD Pro, I would just keep it stock. Whereas if I were to buy a Frontier Pro-4X, I feel like I would have to like lift it a little bit and put bigger tires on it for me to feel like the truck is just like where it should be. And so I know that's not exactly the best answer for like which one is better, but I think that's an answer. So anyways, again, a huge shout out and thank you to the Brent Brown Twitter here in Orem, Utah for giving me some time with the TRD Pro. Let me know which one you guys would pick out of the bunch, whether it's the Frontier or the Tacoma. And then like I said, link to their inventory in the description down below. Ask for Easton if you have any questions. That ending was all over the place. I'll see you guys.